G'day guys, in this video I'm going to show you how you can integrate your Xero, your accounting software, with Stand Out from the Pack, so that whenever you create an invoice and you send it out to a customer through Stand Out from the Pack, that same invoice will then be created in your Xero, and there's actually a real-time sync as well. So whenever you make changes to the invoice inside Stand Out from the Pack, those changes will also reflect in Xero, and it will also map your taxes. Let's dive into that. So first thing, inside your account, head over to Settings and Integrations. And in there, you'll be able to find Xero. Now, if you're looking at this and your view might look slightly different, it may be that you're on the older version of how the integrations page shows up. But nevertheless, you should be able to find Xero option on that page. So what you need to do next is simply click on Manage. This will take you to this screen where it prompts you to connect to your Xero. Now, a couple of things I want to highlight before you go ahead and do that, just so you understand how this works. Once you connect to Xero, what's going to happen is Stand Out from the Pack will pull in all of your contacts that you have in Xero and add them into your CRM. This is how the mapping happens, so that whenever you create a new invoice, the system can attribute the invoice to the same contact. This is only one-time thing that happens during the initial setup. Going forward, any new contacts you create in Stand Out from the Pack and you send them an invoice through Stand Out from the Pack, those contacts will be also added in Xero. So that's how that works. So we actually do have a help article on this as well. If you head over to help.standoutfromthepack.com, this will take you to our knowledge base. And if we search for Xero, you will see a help article that will explain pretty much everything that I'm going over in this video. If reading through is your preference, then I recommend you go through the article. It explains how the mapping works and a couple of helpful screenshots as well. Now, to illustrate this in a little bit more detail visually so that you can fully understand how the integration works, have a look at this diagram. So the first thing happens is you connect your Stand Out from the Pack account to Xero through Settings, Integration, Xero. I'll show you again in a second. This is going to authorize your Stand Out from the Pack account, and then you'll be able to select the organization. Then the contacts from Xero will be imported into your Stand Out from the Pack account. That's what's going to be used going forward for mapping upcoming invoices, so that there is the sync, basically. Whenever you create an invoice inside Stand Out from the Pack, it will be synced to Xero. So invoice will be created in Xero. All the line items will be there, including discounts and taxes. You just have to map your taxes before inside Stand Out from the Pack and then use them, obviously. Then if you are charging different currencies, that will pass into your Xero. Obviously, you just need to make sure you've got the relevant Xero subscription, because the baseline subscription, they don't have multi-currency. So I think that's only available like on the top line. And yeah, so it is one thing I want to highlight. This is a one-way sync. So, you know, if you do any changes inside Xero to that invoice, it will not carry over back to the invoice inside Stand Out from the Pack. It only works one way. So if you do make any changes to invoices, you would want to make them inside Stand Out from the Pack, so that the invoice is then updated inside Xero. Okay, so let me show you how you finalize the integration and then show you how it works in real time. So I'm inside the Settings Integrations. I'm going to click on Manage. This is going to prompt me to connect to my Xero account. So I'm already logged in my Xero, so this would be pretty straightforward. Let's just give it a second to load. Awesome. So from here, a couple of information to be aware of. This is understanding what's going to be happening. So make sure that you read through it, make sure you're aware of what you're doing. But basically what I've explained is the process. I'm going to allow access. Now from here, I've got a drop down to select which organization I want to sync into. So this is organization that I have in Xero. You might have multiple businesses in your Xero account. So this is why you need to select one. I already have one, so that's what I'm selecting here. And then in here is where I need to select the chart of accounts to sync the invoices to. So when the invoice is paid, for example, it'll automatically be reconciled against that chart account. So as you can see here in my Xero, if you didn't know, it's under the accounting chart of accounts. And if I go to my revenue accounts, because this is going to be used towards revenue accounts because it's invoice. So in here, I can see some of the accounts that I've got available. Now for our purposes, we're going to use this thing for charging for agency services. So whenever we issue an invoice for our business to customers such as yourself, we will create an invoice inside Stand Out from the Pack. We want to allocate that type of invoice towards this account here that we've got agency services for our use case. So just select the one that makes the most sense. Now, one thing with this, I want to highlight is you will not see all the chart of accounts. You only see certain accounts here. And that is because in Xero, you need to make sure that that account, if you select it, if you click on it, you need to make sure that you enable this checkbox here, enable payments to this account. And once you do check that box, then that's going to show up on this list. So if you come across this list and that account is not there, go to Xero, do those changes, and then you'll just have to restart the whole integration process by clicking back and then starting again. At that point, you'll be able to see that account there. So I'm going to show you here, and I'm selecting the agency services. One extra thing with this also, what I would say is if you wanted to have a dedicated account to track those invoices from stand out from the pack, you might want to create a whole new account altogether. Speak to your accountant. Obviously, this is not a taxing advice, so speak to your accountant on what's the best solution there. I'm just sharing how we do it for our purposes so that you have a bit of an example that you might wish to follow. But again, always speak to your accountant. All right, so I've selected the organization, I've selected the account that I want to use. I'm going to confirm and proceed. Now, once I hit this button, I've got a couple of hundred contacts. All of those contacts will, within a couple of seconds, will show up in my CRM. So before I do that, I want to show you that. Okay, so I'm inside one of our accounts. And so in here, I can see I've got 430 contacts. That's before the integration has happened. So now I hit confirm and proceed, and you're going to see the difference from 430 jumping up to a higher number. The reason I wanted to show this to you is you might want to decide to then categorize those contacts, because not all of the contacts that get migrated over you want to keep inside this stand up from the pack account, because not all of them are representing your customers. So if you want to do that, here's how you do that. So I've just synced this up, and if I refresh the screen or just simply click out and click back into the contacts, you'll now see a difference in the total number of contacts I've got available. So it now jumped to 630 from 430. And if I go back and come back in, this number will keep going up. And that's because the update is still in process. So the data's now coming through inside the account. So more contacts are being added. So while that's happening, we want to finalize the taxes. So in here is we want to click on map taxes. This is going to give us a couple of options where we can map the taxes. If the taxes are not mapping up here for certain categories, that just because they don't exist. Generally for invoices, what I would do here is purely just charging the GST for that. So I would be selecting the GST here to charge for on the invoice. Now where you need to set up your tax categories is inside the payment. So this is the option that I'm seeing here is what's coming up from the pack sub account inside settings. So if that's something that you want to do, then you might leave out of this screen in case you don't have any of those categories set up, and do that first. And so what we're going to do is we're going to head over to payments, and this is going to take us to the main screen here with the payments dashboard. And then from here, we're going to click on settings up the top here. And then from there, we click on taxes. And then in here, I already have a tax set up here for GST, charging 10% GST for goods and services. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create another tax bracket, tax rate. I'm just going to copy it from here. So I'm going to go GST-free income and put it right as 0. And then for description, I'm just going to go goods and services tax and add my company tax ID or ABN and put the tax agency name. So in this case, Australian Tax Office. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to hit add. So now I've got two GST options, one if I'm charging GST and one if I'm not charging GST. That's pretty much all I need for my needs. From here, I'm going to leave out of this because right now I only have that one option available. So I'm going to cancel this and get out of this screen altogether. I can just close this window and then go back to settings, integrations, and then click on Xero manage, click on manage. And that's going to take me to the screen where I can finalize the linking. So I'm going to go GST 10% and select GST, and then GST free income right here, select that one and then hit save. So what I'm effectively doing is when I'm creating an invoice inside Stand Out from the Park and I'm attributing the right taxing, it will be properly mapped against the tax rates inside Xero. So that's what I've done. And the only reason I'm selecting only the collection of GST is because I'm only using this for syncing invoices when I'm sending invoices out to customers. So I'm not concerned with bills or anything because I won't be using Stand Out from the Pack to manage those. That's what Xero is for. So that's why I've done it that way. Again, speak to your accountant if you want to do something different, but that's how I'm doing it. I'm going to hit save and click update. And that is done. So the job is done now. Let's just test this and make sure that everything works. So the easiest way to do that is I'm just going to test sending out an invoice to a dummy contact just to test it out and see how the updates work. So I do have a contact here in my Xero I'm going to create a brand new contact that actually doesn't exist in Xero at all. And I'm going to create it inside my account here as a new contact in the CRM. So what we're going to do is I'm going to look it up first if it exists. This is just a made up contact. Okay, I do have one of those there, but it's not inside Xero because this is a contact that I had there before I did the integration. So from here, I'm going to go to that contact and I'm going to go to payments on the right hand side. And then from here, I'm going to click on the action and click on create invoice. Now, a couple of things here. So I've got the contact pulled in from my CRM. That's all good there. And I've got the invoice number automatically generated. This is, the invoice number, like sequential in terms of invoices I've sent out through Stand Out from the Pack. Now, you might be asking, okay, well, I've got different sequential numbers inside my Xero. Will this be an issue? Not really, because what I found that Xero creates invoices starting from 00 something, whereas in here, additional zeros in front of the number, so it won't create a conflict with, invoice numbers that you might already have there. So that should be all good. And so from here, we're just going to create a product. I'm just going to go demo service, hit enter. I can add a description as well. Also, description does not carry over, but the item number is. I'm going to go with $100. And I'm just going to leave the tax out for the minute, and I'm going to explain why in a second. So I've got $100 invoice for whatever service to the contact that I want to send it out to. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit send and send the invoice to the made up customer. So that's now sitting here as an invoice with a due date for that customer. Now, if I go to my Xero and look up that contact, it is now being created. So it wasn't there before. It's now being created. If I click into it, I can see there is an invoice already sitting with that same invoice number. And I can see that it's awaiting payment and the due date and everything matches the way we've set it up inside Stand Out from the Pack. And if I look at that invoice, we can see the description of the service here being just that, like the name of the service, amount, and we can see there is no tax rate. So by default, my Xero account just added bus excluded because we didn't select tax rate. Now, here is how, because this is a connection between those two invoices, if I go back to the invoice inside Stand Out from the Pack and make changes to it, such as adding a tax, I can go here, select a tax. So in this case, I'm selecting, let's go GST, and hit save, and then hit save on the top right. Then within a second, if I go back to Xero and then refresh the screen, you can now see the tax rate has updated. So it now has a GST amount. And so now it's $110. Let's just do another change here as well. Let's just add additional service. So let's just do another one of these demo. Let's go consultation for $250. Example, I'm going to select the tax rate. Again, let's say this one is a consultation to a customer that's outside of Australia. So I'm going to go GST-free income and hit save. Go back to Xero, refresh, and there it is. So we have two items now, one with GST, one with GST-free income, and everything works. Let's do one more thing as well so you can fully understand this. If we go back to the main contact here, or we can just look at the, see here awaiting payment for $360. And I click on that invoice and click on those three dots here. I can record a payment. So what I can do here is I can just record a manual payment. Let's say the customer has paid a portion of the invoice manually in cash, whatever, and just put $100. I can put a note there. I can put a payment date. So let's just go, well, I'll just leave that for now and just hit submit. If I go back to Xero and refresh the screen, you will now see it's still awaiting payment because it's not been fully paid. But I can see the total amount has now changed by $100. And the payment is actually being recorded in my Xero. So if I click on it, I can see it here as a payment against this invoice for $100, which I can then reconcile against in my bookkeeping. Or I can just delete it from here. Now this is, again, I should highlight, this is how this works. So if I go ahead and delete this $100 payment from Xero, this will not reflect inside Stand Out from the Pack. And that is because there's only a one-way sync. So if I go back to Stand Out from the Pack and I refresh this page, you'll see that the status partially paid is already there. And if I go into the invoice, it's going to continue to show $260 with $100 being paid. So this is why you always want to make changes on the Stand Out from the Pack side on the invoices rather than in your Xero. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. So there you have it, guys. Xero integration between Stand from the Pack and Xero. It's a super handy way to streamline your invoicing and save you a bit of time on having to manually generate invoice inside your Xero if you are doing it inside Stand from the Pack. As always, if you have any more questions, reach out to us. We have a lot of support options. If you head over to standoutfromthepack.com.au/support or head over to help.standoutfromthepack.com, you can look up the Xero invoice integration article that has some more details about the process. Alternatively, you can always come along to one of our open office hours, which are available to you a couple of times a week. If you head over to standoutfromthepack.com.au/support, you can click on weekly open office hours and book in for our next slot. We do this a couple of times a week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at the time of making this video. So you just book in, come along, and we can help you troubleshoot any issues that you have with your account.
Subscribe for more tips on harnessing the power of smart automation and AI in your business. Stand out, grow, and prosper with us.